gang, a couple of real quick disclaimers. One, sorry about the, what do you call it, audio quality. Usually it doesn't suck so much, but it's sucking a little bit here, so that sucks. Two, generally if I'm editing my videos very well, for every minute or so a video I record, there's about 6 minutes of editing or 5 minutes of editing that goes on with it. The reason why it takes so long is because I do have a stutter. I don't know if people ever notice it, but I do, and in the videos I definitely notice it, and I try and edit out my stuttering. It's a very silent stutter, so it's not like I'll be going where, but there's a silent stutter. So I'm not going to edit that out, so bear with it, because I am not going to spend 800 hours editing the video. Peace. Let the video begin. Hey gang, so this video is to make up for the class we missed on Wednesday. The video comes with an accompanying quiz that will be posted online also. The quiz will be several quotes where you'll need to identify the authors of those quotes. Now here's what I want you to do for that quiz. Brief instructions here. Alright. Take the book and hide it so you don't look at it when you take the quiz. However, you can have this video open to try and figure out where the quotes come from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe and talk about what the various authors' points are, what they say. You're going to learn that, and you're going to go, whoa, Plato didn't like democracy. And then you are going to take the quiz, and when the quote is, what sort of society will it be? There is democracy bad, no good democracy bad. You'll be able to say, you know what, that quote sounds like it would come from Plato, that the idea in the quote, the information in the quote, sounds like it would have come from Plato, and then you mark that it came from Plato, and then you get an A, and everything would be great. And again, no book, but you can have this video. You can revisit the video while you take the quiz. So that should be pretty awesome for everybody, right? Yeah! Okay, everybody, I'm just going to plow through some of these authors that are in, 34 to 48. I will give an additional comment or something. I don't assign the introductions to the sections for my health. It doesn't actually help my health at all. I assign those because I want y'all to learn some things. And if you read the introduction, it kind of gives you an idea of what the authors are going to say before you actually go and read the piece, the excerpt from the authors, which might help you figure out what the heck these dead people are talking about. Mostly dead people. I think they're all dead. Okay, so first let's talk about Plato. Plato is not a fan of democracy. He views governing as a skill, such as being a ship's captain or a doctor. That would be pretty cool if we had our government today be all like the skilled people get to do it, because then I would totally be president of the world. So Plato, number one, thinks democracy is a skill that needs to be practiced, and those philosophers, he likes to use the term philosophers, those philosophers should be the ones in control. Plato does, however, note that in a democracy, the philosophers, the intelligent people, aren't necessarily the ones that the people will put into power. He's got this one exchange where he says something like, "Then you must tell it to anyone who is surprised that society, democratic society, does not value its philosophers, and try first to convince him that it would be far more surprising if it did." I feel like you can see a little bit of this democracy not valuing its philosophers. It's like smart people. It's rejection of a skilled governing class. By looking around some of the stuff today, you got insurgent candidates such as Trump, who's being all like, "I don't know anything, so vote for me," and Ted Cruz, who talks about how he was the Zodiac killer. So you have this very anti-establishment, sort of anti-smartness mood within democracy. It can be a little frustrating. I'm going off on a little bit of a side tangent, but still staying true to Plato, where let's say somebody has a biology degree. If you ask them on biology stuff, you will defer to their authority on biology, if that makes sense. So you'll be like, "Biology major, why do plants grow?" And the biology major's like, "Oh, they take in carbon dioxide and nitrogen and release oxygen and all that stuff." And you'll go, "Neat, I'm so glad you told me this stuff, biology person." And you'll recognize their expertise, their authority. Whereas, if you happen to be a political science and philosophy major like myself, everybody's got an opinion on the subject. And when I give out my informed, I spent like 2 decades, yeah, that's right, since I was 10, 2 decades, researching and studying politics. When I give out that opinion, people are like, that's just one dude's opinion, he doesn't know anything, he's all partisan, blah, blah, blah. Bernie Sanders, 2012. I think it's funny when Plato says that then democracy originates when the poor win, kill or exile their opponents, and give the rest equal rights and opportunities of office, appointment to office, being as a rule by lot. So Plato sees that if you don't have a skilled leader, then people are going to kind of overthrow that leader and establish a democratic system. However, in a democratic system, you don't actually have people who know things running the government. And when you don't have people who know things when they're running the government, society starts to crumble. There becomes tyranny because the person who's at the top and doesn't know anything is like, "Oh goodness, all these people are, starting to riot against me," and whatever. That person will go like, "Hey," they make a vague reference to outside help. Get outside help to help put down the people, and it'll eventually lead to tyranny. So democracy leads to tyranny. Take that, America. And that's basically Plato's stick. Alright, you want skilled people in office, you want experts, democracy's dumb. You want experts because if you got democracy, society's going to crumble and it's going to lead to tyranny. Case closed. So, that's Plato. Moving on to Frederick the Great, the enlightened despot. The enlightened despot should give you some clue as to what he's going to talk about, what his ideas are going to be, basically. Tyrannical dude in power, but that dude's all enlightened and helpful and whatnot. Okay, so Frederick the Great, also not a huge fan of democracy. However, he's like, you know what, it's okay. It's okay that democracy isn't running around doing stuff. Because the sovereign, the leader, the king, the master, the magistrate, is the head of the government. The magistrate and the people, the government, all make up one body. If the magistrate wants to do well, if the sovereign wants to do well, the sovereign's got to make sure that the people are also doing well. If the people are poor, guess who's also going to be poor? The dude at top. Let's say the dude at the top, the sovereign, wants to spend a crap ton of money building palaces to himself and have lots of wine and also flat screen TVs or something. Will he be able to do that if his subjects are poor? No. Why? Because his subjects are poor and he won't have like a tax base to draw money from. You need that tax revenue, you know, so you need your people to be rich so that you can also then be rich. Therefore, don't worry about having a democracy because non-democratic monarch leader dude will do just fine by the people. Let's see. What was the one other part? That actually might have been it. Yeah. So democracy, not quite one body. The people is. The leader wants to make sure his people are well off, because when his people are well off, then the leader is well off. So as leader, the leader will naturally do what is in the best interests of the people. That's Frederick the Great. Rousseau. Side note, in case anybody's wondering, I am doing this video like a short clip at a time, so that my stream of consciousness doesn't get too long and things really go off the rail. Okay, so Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 36, the general will. One thing that's, well, the thing, I guess, that's pretty interesting about Rousseau is Rousseau feels like the people will all, in general, if left to their own devices, come to a pretty solid, similar conclusion. That if you have people take an issue, then go home, let's say, and think about it, contemplate it by themselves in isolation, they'll come back and we'll have some differences, but in general we'll be able to iron out them and create a general will, a good in society. So Rousseau sees associations naturally forming in a democratic society, and these associations, as the people sort of come together, they don't just consider stuff in isolation. As they come together, they form these associations. Those associations eventually sort of get all tyrannical and whatnot. Rousseau also does not believe that democracy is totally sustainable. The people en masse do not have the, let's say, time to devote to keep making decisions that the many govern. Instead, he's like, dudes, power will naturally sort of clump into the hands of a few oligarchs, right? A few smarter people and all that jazz. A democracy might have one day been something that could have worked in a very small state, but not in a very big state where things are very complex and there's a lot going on and all that jazz. If, let's say, we were a city, like our classroom was just a city and we were being all democratic, democracy might work in there. But in a big complex country with a bajillion people and all that stuff, nah, not gonna work. So we need a smarter people to run stuff, more representative form of government, not a democratic necessarily form of government. He does end with this line, were there a people of gods, their government would be democratic. So perfect a government is not for men. We see this sort of theme come up every now and then later on in political theory, the idea that people are not perfect, they're not gods, therefore you're going to have trouble with various forms of government. We need to try and create a government that accounts for the fact that people aren't gods and controls for that. Immanuel Kant, 37, distilling Kant's stuff into a few sentences. All the individuals of the world have certain rights that cannot be abridged, even if the society as a whole would benefit if you violate somebody's rights. And by the way, there's a fly all around here, so that's annoying. Kant is responding a lot to utilitarian ideas at the time. Remember, utilitarianism is what is best for society is whatever maximizes the happiness or the net goodness in society, which sometimes can mean certain people's rights get abridged. Kant's not cool with that. He's all like, listen, there are some people have certain rights, freedoms, etc. that you just can't like mess with. Tough, or whatever. Okay, cool. So that's basically, I mean, kind of what Kant is saying in his thing here. One additional interesting, fun part he has is he talks about that we have an obligation, a responsibility to leave the land to our descendants in good condition. Think about it. If our ancestors didn't leave it to us in good condition, then we wouldn't be able to do jack, right? I mean, you can't have an earth that's bad. So that's something. Okay, one more thing about Kant that I don't think I included. Kant's excited about everybody being equal under the law. That, basically, there's equality under the law. Law people aren't sort of above the law. People that make laws are not above the law. And you got a little bit of John Locke in there, the whole people can't give up certain rights. At the very end, he even says that by contract, I cannot give up certain rights, because if I give up those rights by contract, then the contract's null and void, and then I have the rights again. But equality under the law, equality under the law. Okay, John Stuart. John Stuart Mill. He's basically trying to figure out what the best form of government looks like, what form of government best serves the people. He comes to the same conclusion as a lot of people, that this fly is pissing me off, and it's very annoying. In addition to coming to that conclusion, John Stuart Mill is like, hey, in a small city-state, people can have a democracy, because that's Jesus Christ, because that's pretty cool. I just flew right up next to my eye. In a small city-state, people can have a democratic society, because we can all participate and see ourselves participating in that society, etc., etc., etc. However, in a bigger society, the best form of government is the representative government, because we have a large society that has a lot of complex tasks where we need very sort of specialized people to conquer those tasks. So doing economy stuff for the government is hard, so we need economy people to do it. Whereas if we're a town like just the 25 people in our classroom, who cares, more or less. So at the end, he says, but since all cannot, in a community exceeding a single small town, participate personally in any but some very minor portions of public business, it follows that the ideal type of perfect government must be representative. We elect people to represent our ideas, our wills, our wishes, because everything's too big for us to represent ourselves. Okay, so just a couple of notes, hopefully, on John Rawls. Number one, or something. One thing he says that I find interesting or cool or something is that the majority in a society, whatever the majority decides, is not necessarily just. That morality has never considered, that's not entirely true, but he says the traditional concepts of justice, morality, whatever, have not considered that the majority rule creates justice. That justice is something that is sort of above the population. That if we all vote, let's say we vote 18-1 to beat up somebody and take all their money, even though the Democratic majority came up with that decision, that does not mean that decision was just. Okay? So he says, in a just society, in a democratic society, a just constitution will have some protections for the minority, will have some things that curb the authority of the majority. He does, however, also concern himself with, or is concerned by, the fact that such such protections, maybe, for the minority against the will of the majority in a democratic society could be used to, and I quote-ish, kind of, These limitations may often be used by entrenched minorities to preserve their illicit advantages. These are talking about, like, rich people. They got, like, if you're rich or you're born rich, you have a much better chance of succeeding in life. If you cheat yourself to riches, cheat others to riches, you have like a bunch of richness because you defrauded other people or something. You then have the power to protect your illegal activity because you got all that money or whatever, and even though you're in the minority, you can use the Constitution to protect that illicit advantage, that either stolen advantage or lottery of birth advantage. The stats on this are honestly like mind-blowing on how much poverty affects your life chances. So that's cool. And was there another thing? Oh, so yeah, on the issue of a just society, or sorry, justice being the will of the majority, Rawls says that oftentimes it is prudent or in our interests to follow the will of the majority, to submit to the will of the majority, even if it isn't necessarily just or the right decision. However, submitting to the will of the majority does not mean that we think it is right, that it is the right thing to do, that we reserve the ability to go, hey, bad decision, bad. The one other thing he talks about, sipping my drink. The one other thing he talks about is that, how did it go? In a democratic society, we tend to think of correct decisions coming about through people, sitting back and contemplating what is rationally the right thing to do. We see the veil of ignorance pop up again. Veil of ignorance being the veil that keeps you from seeing who you are, so that when you make a decision, you can't benefit yourself. So if I know that I'm a white male, I could make a decision, a law saying all white males get $100. However, if I don't know if I'm a white male or not, if I have that veil of ignorance that shields me from knowing who I am, rationally I'll sit back and I'll probably go, you know what, that law to give all white males $100, maybe I won't support that because I don't know if that's who I'll end up being. Kind of makes sense. So he's like, in a sort of ideal democratic society, that's the way we make decisions, and when there are decisions made that we disagree with, we appeal to that sort of rational, disinterested position that, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, made that decision, made a certain decision, passed a certain law, or passed a bill in the Senate or whatever, because he was looking out for his own best interests, not the best interests of everybody. He was considering who he was in a particular position and trying to be, yay, Mitch McConnell myself, and not step back and rationally see what is best for society. Okay. Okay, now let's let the socialists come in and ruin democracy for us. Oh my god. So first we got like this dude Lenin, who's all like the bourgeoisie control everything and the capitalist scum are killing and oppressing the proletariat, blah blah blah. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what he said, and that's what he sounded like too. We have video evidence of it. So Lenin's all like, democracy is this fictional idea created by like rich people to make the proletariat, the working masses, all subservient to them. He cites as evidence of this the fact that, look at any modern society, any modern constitution, and there are laws on the books to break up worker organization, to put down, say, strikes, for example, to declare martial law to force the proletariat to do what the capitalists want them to do. He calls people wage slaves because they don't have the freedom to make choices themselves because their wages are dependent upon other people. Let's see. And then he's all excited about the Soviet Union. Proletariat democracy, of which Soviet government is one of the forms, has brought a development and expansion of democracy hitherto unprecedented in the world, precisely for the vast majority of the population, for the exploited and toiling people. He's all like, in a bourgeoisie democracy, the workers, the toiling people, the masses, are barred from participation. It's really the banks and the stock markets that make decisions for the society. That the toiling people, the workers, are kept out of those decisions. However, in a true democracy, in a proletariat democracy, the workers are the ones that have the power. Now, moving on to Carol Plattman, whatever. Carol here wants to extend democracy to the workplace. She talks about, where is it? The theory of participatory democracy. Words are hard when they are long and they have P's and R's in them. Basically, she's like, listen, what's one area of our lives where we don't have any sort of democratic input, but we spend like totally most of our time in work? When's the last time any of y'all got to vote on something at work? My guess would be probably almost never, unless you work at some communist co-op, right? Okay, so she's like, in order for us to have a true democracy, a participatory democracy, we need to extend democracy through all areas of life, including / especially the workplace, where we have control over industry, our working conditions, that there aren't necessarily a hierarchy between the managers and men, etc. So for me, this is a kind of interesting point that I think we should step back and consider for a second. If we are talking about democracy giving us control over our own lives, but we don't have control over our own lives in the space we sort of theoretically spend the most time of our lives in, meaning the workplace, do we really have control over our lives or not? She would suggest not, that there should be democratic authority and democratic decision making moved into the workplace. She also talks about this moving democracy into the workplace also as having a positive effect on overall democracy, because people will be able to see their participation more directly and how see the effects of their participation more directly. They'll be able to go, I am being able to participate in all aspects of my life democratically. I can have some control over the decisions I make. And she says that this element of people having control over every aspect of their life will lead them to engage more with civil society, learn more, and it'll create this positive feedback loop, creating a better democratic citizen. So we're gonna, hopefully most of us or something, are gonna vote in 2016, meaning this year, meaning in November, for a whole bunch of different elected officials. However, if that's the only place that we have democratic input, control over our lives, is that really a lot? If we only get to exercise our control every 2 to 4 years, how much time are we actually going to invest in learning about the society around us and becoming better democratic citizens? Maybe not a lot, because we don't actually get to make that many decisions for ourselves. If, however, we move into the workplace and extend democracy into there, then we have a day-to-day interest in learning about society. And I wonder if flies bugged her as much as this one is bugging me. Moving democracy into the workplace will give us more control over our day-to-day lives. And when we have more control over our day-to-day lives, we become more invested in making decisions. More invested in learning about society and others and such, so that we make good decisions. So, other than finally getting some control over our workplace and democratizing that, the theory of participatory democracy enhances the democratic citizen, enhances overall civil democracy. Carol here has got again, just so you know, theory of participatory democracy. So, how's everybody doing so far? I know this can be painfully boring, so I'm trying to bring as much energy as I can to it and keep you entertained or something. But maybe this is painful for you and you're like, holy cow, I can't watch this. This guy is so annoying. It's entirely possible. Sorry for those who think that. But energy, up. Let's talk about Aristotle. There isn't really a lot to talk about Aristotle other than a danger in democracy. Notice the heading is Dangers in democracy. Whoa, that might tell you something about what the section is about. Aristotle's excerpt is the rule of the people and rule of the law. Basically, in a nutshell, Aristotle's like, we need to make sure we have a rule of people. Aristotle's like, we need to make sure we have a rule of law, not a rule of the people. We need to make sure our law is somehow constant. It applies to everybody equally, that we can't have the masses running around ruling by what he says, what he calls decrees. Another kind of democracy is where the mass is sovereign and not the law. The whole of the people is sovereign, not the laws. Some people are better than the law. This kind arises when decrees are sovereign instead of law, and this happens because of demagogues. In law-abiding democracies, the demagogue does not arise. On the contrary, the best of the citizens preside. There's that other thing again about how, like, in Greeks, we want smart people to rule like me, and not people who didn't spend most of their life concerned with politics and policy. Just saying. This is because the demos, the people, become a monarch, one person composed of many, so the mass of people sort of gets a group will think going on, and they become crazy with power and become tyrants. So Aristotle's all like, watch out for that part of democracy. We don't want to be like super democratic where literally the majority makes all the rules no matter what, because then the rules can just be willy-nilly thrown around and the majority can gang up on like another dude or something. So the next person we're going to look at is James Madison, titled The Danger of Faction. James Madison was writing at a time where he was trying to convince the colonies that the Constitution should be adopted. The United States Constitution should be adopted as the governing body of the land. And he was, let's say, trying to describe how the Constitution solves a number of problems of democracy while keeping intact the basic idea that people have control over their government or over their lives, that we won't necessarily be subject to tyranny. Madison is concerned about democracy, the rise of liberty, the rise of freedoms. Will create a situation of mob rule where private rights and the public good and private rights will be infringed upon, so we need to control those factions. However, factions are inevitable when there's lots of liberty and stuff, and you can't, you can solve the problem of faction two ways. One, squash liberty, or two, control for the negative effects of factions. Madison says, let's control for the negative effects of factions. And he lists a number of different ways where he does that. He says, one, let's have a republican form of government, a republic government, where us, the sort of mass of people, vote on a few people to be the government to make decisions for us, and that way we elevate the better of us to the role of legislature. keep this in mind when we watch the John Oliver piece on state legislatures. Are we really elevating the better of us to positions of power in the government? So, he talks about that. He also talks about how we will elect people who are the better of us, and then those people who are the better of us will elect even better people to also inhabit other areas of government, to rule and be representative of our interests. So while the people have ultimate control, we have a couple of layers of safeguards of supposedly intelligent, rational, deliberative people that are not going to infringe upon the rights of the minority. One other thing he talks about, which is pretty interesting and cool, is, and he thinks, I guess he's done this, we need to make sure, he says, that the body that represents us is numerous enough so that it can represent the people. However, not so numerous that there's confusion and anarchy at that legislative body. Here's an example. The House of Representatives is 435 members. Let's say it was 20,000 members. We would still have representatives representing us, and we would still have fewer people representing us than the whole body, and theoretically those people would also be better than like you and me. However, 20,000 people would be crazy. Like, you couldn't get work done in a Congress of that size. Lots of our readers on democracy themselves have talked about how democracy maybe really only works in small cities, not in large societies. So, we want to make sure that we don't have a legislative body of 20,000 people. However, we don't want that legislative body to be so small that the small group of people that we elect can sort of like become super close friends and, you know, not consider the will of the people, not consider needing to represent their interests. So it needs to be large enough to represent the people, but not so large as to cause chaos, and small enough so that we don't have chaos, but not too small so that we won't end up with a sort of tyranny of the small legislatures of the oligarchy. Cool, cool. Alexis de Tocqueville is from France. He's visiting the United States, and he loves the United States, and he's super sort of upset about what's going on in France in the early to mid 1800s. Around that time, France is undergoing a bunch of sort of successive revolutions, cutting off people's heads, etc. There's this idea that maybe the mass of the people do actually hold all the power. Maybe there is pure democracy in France, and the pure democracy in France looks a lot like rivers of blood through the streets. Kill the nobles! Off with his head! The king! Bad! And so, de Tocqueville's like, oh, that's so terrible. He looks at America and is like, but America is doing something pretty good. De Tocqueville starts off by saying that he has asserted that the ultimate authority rests with the majority of the people. However, it is a detestable maxim that, politically speaking, the people have the right to do anything. So he's like, the majority have the will, have the authority to do things. However, the people shouldn't have the right to do anything. So how can I sort of square that circle? He's like, well, the majority has the ultimate authority to do stuff, but within the confines of a just law. Okay? He then also talks about God. He sort of justifies this sort of limit on the rights of the majority, because human beings are not God. We're not like totally omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent. Is that the other one? Whatever. Basically, we're not perfect. Okay, so because we're not perfect, we need to have some things in there to control our craziness. And the just laws that can rein in the majority, the sort of will of the majority, will do that. And this looks like it might be a good stopping point. I'm at a little over 50 minutes, and I'm sure y'all are getting burnt out. I'm tired. Been at this for about almost 3 hours. So, peace. We'll do the John Oliver thing on Monday, and we'll talk about if the best of us are elected and what that means for democracy, blah, 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 blah. We'll do Weber and this other guy and Montesquieu and Locke. I don't know how to pronounce that second guy's name. So, we'll do that. Thanks for hanging around, and I'll have a quiz up for you on this sooner rather than later on the first few readings up to, not including Weber, once before that. Alright, peace.